Hello, this presentation presents our analysis of Paramount Plus and its parent company, Paramount Skydance, and how they are navigating the shift towards streaming and technology. But before diving into our analysis, it's important to understand where it all began. In 1912, Paramount Pictures Corporation was founded by Adolph Zukor, William Wadsworth Hodgkinson, and Jesse L. Lasky. At that time, it was a traditional film studio, focused on producing and distributing movies in the early Hollywood industry. Over the decades, Paramount grew far beyond just film. Through mergers and expansions, it eventually became Paramount Global, a large media conglomerate that combined multiple forms of entertainment, including film, television, and streaming, with well known brands such as CBS, MTV, and Nickelodeon. This evolution marked a major shift, from a single studio to a diversified company active across the entire media landscape. However, this model came under pressure as consumer behavior changed and streaming services became dominant. Traditional TV revenues started declining, while competition in streaming increased rapidly. In response to these challenges, the company was taken over in 2025 by Skydance Media and Redbird Capital Partners, led by the Ellison family. This takeover was not without controversy, as it took place in a politically sensitive context and raised concerns about influence on media and journalism. Following the acquisition, the company was rebranded as Paramount Skydance, with a clear strategic focus on streaming, technology, and innovation, aiming to compete with major players like Netflix. So, why are companies like Paramount now trying to compete with platforms like Netflix? The answer lies in how the film and television industry are rapidly changing. Streaming services are increasingly competing with traditional television as more consumers prefer on demand content instead of fixed schedules. This shift has fundamentally changed how media is produced, distributed, and consumed. However, this does not mean that traditional television has completely disappeared. Many consumers keep their TV subscriptions, meaning that streaming is not fully replacing TV, but rather existing alongside it. At the same time, competition has intensified. The market is now dominated by large streaming platforms, and companies are constantly fighting for subscribers. One of the key challenges here is subscription fatigue, where consumers feel overwhelmed by the number of streaming services they are subscribed to. Because of this, users tend to switch between platforms rather than staying loyal to one service, making it harder for companies like Paramount to build a stable customer base. On top of that, streaming has a very saturated market. Today, the industry is considered mature, but also very challenging. Subscription prices have risen significantly, often even faster than inflation, which puts pressure on consumers. As a result, users are becoming more selective in the services they choose to keep, since maintaining multiple subscriptions leads to higher recurring costs. At the same time, we see a clear shift in strategy within the industry, where companies initially focused on rapid subscriber growth. The focus has now moved towards profitability and maximizing revenue per user. To achieve this, platforms are introducing different revenue strategies, such as tiered subscriptions, including cheaper plans with ads, and optimizing their platforms to increase engagement and spending. However, these strategies can also make it even harder to retain users, which again reinforces the challenge of building a stable and loyal customer base. If we look at the market share to see how Paramount is doing in the US, they are standing in sixth place with only 12% behind them. That means Paramount Plus only has 9% of the streaming service market share, which is significantly lower compared to other players in the market. As you can see, Amazon Prime and Netflix are the leaders here. Even HBO Max, Disney Plus, and Hulu hold a larger market share. So this raises an important question. How does Paramount compete in such a crowded market? Paramount uses a mix of different types of media. On the one hand, it still relies on its traditional strength, like making movies and running TV channels such as CBS, MTV, and Nickelodeon. On the other hand, it is investing heavily in streaming through Paramount Plus. Because their content is spread across different platforms, they reach a very broad audience, from traditional TV viewers to streaming users and even sports fans. To grow in this competitive market, Paramount works together with partners like telecom companies and broadcasters, making it easier for people to access their content. At the same time, strong and exclusive content remains very important to them. They also invest a lot in creating content and use data to better understand and reach their audience. Their revenue model is quite broad as well, combining subscriptions with advertising and licensing deals. In the end, their main goal is to grow their number of subscribers, collect more data, and become more profitable through ads and different distribution channels. To support this strategy, content plays a key role, and especially the intellectual property they own. Paramount already has a strong portfolio of well known franchises, which helps them attract and retain viewers like Big Brother, Dexter, NCIS, and South Park. However, their position could change significantly after acquiring Warner Bros. This would give them access to some valuable IPs in the industry, such as Harry Potter, DC Comics, It, and Godzilla. These franchises have large and loyal fan bases, which makes them extremely powerful in attracting subscribers and generating long term revenue. It's time to talk about the money. Although Paramount's total revenue shows some growth, especially driven by its streaming segment, the company is still not profitable. Streaming revenue and subscribers are increasing, but this growth is not enough to offset the decline in traditional TV and the volatility in film. As a result, Paramount is still reporting losses, with both operating income and net earnings remaining negative. So, despite growing revenue, the company continues to struggle financially and is still operating at a loss. If we look at Paramount's cash flow, we see that Paramount makes money, but it's not stable and efficient enough. There is a lot to be said about their cash flow, but the main takeaways are: Paramount's revenues are growing mainly due to streaming, traditional TV revenues are declining, total revenue is recovering toward the end of 2025. However, profitability remains inconsistent, with periods of both profit and loss. Right now, they are operating at a loss. As mentioned earlier, Paramount is currently operating at a loss. Because of this, many investors are losing confidence and pulling out, mainly due to the company's unstable financial situation and high levels of debt. After the announcement of the deal, there was briefly some renewed optimism in the market, and the stock saw a small increase. However, this did not last long. Shortly after, the share price dropped again and is now around 52% lower compared to 6 months ago. But why did the confidence in the company seem to have diminished, even after the deal with Warner Bros.? Paramount is taking a very big risk by spending such a large amount of money on the deal with Warner Bros., especially since the company is already operating at a loss. However, it's important to note that they don't really have many alternatives. The company is under a lot of pressure, and this deal is almost necessary for them to stay competitive in the market. By acquiring Warner Bros., they would gain access to HBO and its large subscriber base, as well as very popular franchises. The idea is that they can attract these viewers to their own platform, Paramount Plus, and significantly grow their number of subscribers. However, this is where the major risk lies. There is no guarantee that these subscribers will actually switch platforms or remain loyal to Paramount Plus. And at the same time, the fact that Paramount is still operating at a loss while putting more than $110 billion on the table also raises serious questions about the company's credibility and financial strategy. So even though the potential upside is very high, the uncertainty is just as large, making this a very risky but necessary gamble for the company. Let's conclude. Paramount operates in a highly competitive market but holds a relatively weak position, with only about 9% market share in the US. To strengthen its position, the company made a risky bid to acquire Warner Bros., hoping to gain more loyal customers. However, Warner initially chose Netflix for greater stability, and although Netflix later withdrew after Paramount's very high offer, the situation raised doubts about Paramount's credibility. Ongoing losses in both streaming and traditional media have further damaged its reputation, especially since such a large bid seemed unrealistic for a smaller, debt-burdened company. To compensate for financial pressure and rising costs, Paramount has increased subscription prices, which risks driving customers away and disrupting the balance between price and value. As a result, the company has become heavily dependent on external funding and struggles with strategic focus. Despite these challenges, though, Paramount does show strengths. It effectively targets its desired audience through AI driven personalization and benefits from strong partnerships, such as major sports broadcasting deals, which help attract and retain viewers. Overall, Paramount is trying to reinvent itself as a streaming and tech company, but in doing so, it is taking significant financial and strategic risks in a competitive market.